A very good afternoon to you. This is your daytime update as we continue keeping you abreast of all the day's breaking and developing stories. And one of those involves Liliesleaf Farm. It is in Rivonia, Johannesburg, and it may soon need to shut its doors due to financial woes as well as mounting debt. The renowned museum and heritage site in the northern Johannesburg area was a safe house for the African National Congress activists during the apartheid era, and also served as the headquarters for the liberation movement. For more on this, we speak to Mr. Nicholas Walpe, the CEO of the Liliesleaf Trust. Good to have you with us once again this afternoon, but on a very different topic. Usually we talk to you commemorating stalwarts who have perhaps either passed away, who are linked to Liliesleaf Farm, as well as the history. But you find yourself in a very difficult situation now due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Tell us more about the challenges that you're facing.
Good afternoon, Tammy, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. We all know what the impact of COVID-19 has had on the world, particularly historical sites, sites of memory, museums, theatres. It's been devastating. And I think that's an important starting point. But if we focus in on Liliesleaf, we have actually really been struggling since around 2010 in terms of trying to secure operational funding. It has always been a particular challenge, and it became even more challenging after 2014 when I noticed a fundamental shift, particularly within the corporate market, because of their requirements in terms of meeting ICT and BE requirements. You know, historical sites and heritage in particular doesn't get a look in. It's excluded. And that's part of the problem. So one of the problems we face is the fact that we are not able to gain corporate funding. And secondly is, there is this kind of anarchic approach by government that you have to be owned effectively by government in order to secure funding. And it goes against what I'd like to call best principles around the world. So in that context, I mean, we've been struggling. I mean, we've managed to secure funding from, particularly in the last couple of years, from overseas governments like the Norwegians and the Swedes. And that has helped us. But in the last 18 months, 2 years, it is Absa Bank who have really kept us going by providing us with an overdraft facility, which we have been able to repay and then reactivate. And it's that really has kept us going. And particularly now, what COVID has done is really thrown a spotlight on the problems that are confronted by the heritage sector.
As a museum and as a place of heritage, I would assume that perhaps your primary source of income comes from visitors who then come and visit Liliesleaf Farm and are taken on a tour around the area and also given a history of Liliesleaf. Is that assumption correct?
It is. But just like any historical site around the world or museum, the fees and the income generated are not sufficient to sustain these sites. And it is a commonly known fact that their support has always come from either corporate sector or from government through grants, which supplements the income being generated. And that's primarily the fundamental problem, Tammy, we face, that regardless of how much income we generate, it is insufficient to meet our operational costs. And that is why we need the additional support. And that is where we find ourselves today in this crisis. That's why we find ourselves, I should say, in this particular crisis. Because our income has fallen to zero. We effectively haven't been open since the 18th of March last year. And we receive no assistance.
Let's talk about the possible solutions. If you could just illuminate the situation for us here. There is the Apartheid Museum. How do you fare in comparison to the Apartheid Museum, for example? Where do they get their funding from? And is that not perhaps a pot that you yourselves will be able to dip into?
Well, I mean, the Apartheid Museum themselves have actually closed due to problems around finances. I mean, if I can just say this, Tammy, I mean, if we look at the whole, call it, sphere of the arts, culture and heritage, we have been decimated. Partly being decimated because tourism has been decimated, but on top of that, the income that we need to survive also needs to be derived from external organizations. And there are so many other sites who unfortunately don't get the look in terms of they are in the same boat. I mean, if I can just say this, I was with a auctioneer the other day, and he was explaining to me that he's been approached by a number of historical sites who are being forced to sell in order to raise the funds to keep them going. So the Apartheid Museum, Liliesleaf, other sites, if we look at the Athol Fulgaard's Theatre, District 6, if we look at the Peter Dirk Ace Theatre in Darling, you know, this is a symptomatic problem. The fundamental problem is that in this country, the arts, culture and heritage are not given the importance they deserve. They are continuously pushed to the periphery, in particular heritage. And why do I say this? If we look at the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture and track its history, from 1994 to 2004, there was no Department of Arts Culture. It was part of Science and Technology, and there was a deputy minister. From 2004 to 2019, yes, there was a Department of Arts and Culture, but in 2019 it got merged into the Department of Sports, so it's now Sports, Arts and Culture. And furthermore, if you look at the naming of the department, heritage does not appear. So by leaving out the word heritage, you're sending a message already to say heritage and history is not something that is given the due importance that it deserves.
Did you, Mr. Wab, qualify for the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program?
No.
Why not?
Because we were told that we don't comply. You know, we approached it. I mean, this is the point, Tammy, you know, it's very ambiguous. I mean, if I come back to it, as I said to you earlier on, you know, we've approached the department and we're told that we're not entitled to funding because we're not a cultural institution, which says unless you are owned by government, you are not entitled to receive funding. Yes, we have in the past received funding from the Department of Arts and Culture, but the last lot of funding we received was 6 years ago, this March 6 years ago. So we have a very skewed situation that there is no kind of place within the broader ambit of support. And, you know, again, I don't know why, but, you know, when I asked the minister if we could gain access to the funding, he said it only applies to culture and arts, not heritage.
How many people are employed by Liliesleaf, and in how much debt are you at the moment?
Okay, so we have 30 staff members, and, you know, my heart bleeds for them. They have been, over the years, incredibly loyal, incredibly supportive, and they have worked at times under the most, how shall I say, difficult conditions in terms of receiving salaries. I mean, and they've received no salary since December. The last time they were paid was in December. So they've gone January, February, March. I'm hoping with this fundraising, crowdfunding exercise that we're going to be doing on the 27th of April, we will raise sufficient funds to not only repair and fix Liliesleaf, but to pay the staff the salaries that they haven't been paid and future salaries. But we're in debt at the moment to the tune of 7 million in total, which, given the overall asset base of Liliesleaf, is very small. At the last audit, we had an asset base of nearly 90 million. So we had assets worth 90 million, which I would assume now It's 2 years. It's close on 100 million. So our debt to our asset base, our ratio is very small. But of course, repaying 7 million in the current climate and given the current state of Liliesleaf is going to be extremely difficult.
When was the last time that you were indeed profitable?
Well, we've never really, look, I think the word profit is not applicable. We've never been, Tammy, in a situation where we have been able to relax and just say we have sufficient funding to keep us going for the next 5 to 10 years. In fact, back in the early 2000s, we won an award, and that award was the award for running a historical site on a shoestring budget. We were considered to be the best historical site that was being run on a shoestring budget. I mean, yes, it's an award, but it's not the type of award one would want to win. So to answer your question, we have never experienced that kind of situation where we can take a deep breath and say we have sufficient funding to keep us going for the next 10 years, or we are sustainable for the next 30 years. It has always been a hand-to-mouth existence.
Well, let's look at the brighter side of that statement that you made in the award that you won. It does show indeed that you're able to run an organization such as yours on a very, very tight, or perhaps sometimes non-existent budget. But talk to us about your fundraising initiatives, what's happening on the 27th, and how is that going to be rolling out?
Okay, so on the 27th of April, and we chose the 27th of April because of Freedom Day, we will be holding a crowdfunding day appeal to raise as much money as we possibly can to start to address hopefully some of the debt, but also to start to pay to get salaries so staff can go back in to work to start to fix the place up and maintain it. So we're asking people to make a donation of either 27 Rand, $27, 27 euros, because it's going to be, we're going to be speaking to people around the world. And the reason why we chose 27 was this year is the 27th year of our democracy, and Nelson spent 27 years in prison. So we just felt that the number 27 was appropriate and had historical meaning. The other amount is 60. We chose 60 Rand, $60, 60 euros, because in August of this year will be the 60th anniversary of the purchase of Liliesleaf. So 60 years ago in August, Liliesleaf was purchased by the Communist Party through a, through a front company called Navian Pty Limited.
Well, thank you very much for that, and we certainly will keep a lookout for the fundraising initiative on the 27th, and we wish you the best of luck, not only yourselves, but institutions such as your own that are a repository of South African history as well as culture and heritage. Thank you so much for your time. That's Nicholas Waltby there. He's the CEO of Liliesleaf Trust. You'll remember there, actually at Liliesleaf Farm, that's one of the places where you can find still a copy of the original Freedom Charter that's displayed there, and there are still rumors about Mandela's gun, which is supposedly hidden somewhere on the grounds there. So certainly a place where South African history has left its footprints. Before we go to a break, let's take a look at some of the leading stories